Fox News Alert, a new era for the Trump administration and a new studio for Happening Now. As we look around, brand new studio, still has that new studio smell.
It does. There aren't any fingerprints anywhere yet. It's great. I don't want to smudge it up.
Lots of bells and whistles, but we hope to bring you the news the old-fashioned way and still advance the stories that are happening now. That's what we're going to try to continue to do here on this program.
Absolutely.
This as General John Kelly takes the reins as White House Chief of Staff. Good morning to you on this Monday. I'm John Scott.
And I'm Molly Line. General Kelly just sworn in and attending his first cabinet meeting as Chief of Staff. The president not only expressing confidence in him, but in the direction the country is taking.
We have a tremendous base. We have a tremendous group of support. The country is optimistic. And I think the general will just add to it. But the country is doing very well. Strongest stock market ever. On Friday, we hit the highest in the history of the stock market. Business is very enthusiastic, and we will proceed and we will keep going. But we have a fantastic leader, Chief of Staff. He's going to do a really great job.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live with this story. John.
Molly, good morning to you. You got a brand new studio there in New York, same old backdrop here at the White House, but every day something brand new. And the president hoping to turn a page with the naming of John Kelly as the new Chief of Staff at the White House. The president just a short time ago praising Kelly's brief tenure at the Department of Homeland Security. Listen here.
What he's done in terms of Homeland Security is record-shattering. You look at the border, you look at the tremendous results we've had, and you look at the spirit. And with a very controversial situation, there's been very little controversy, which is pretty amazing by itself. So I want to congratulate you on having done a fantastic job, General, and we look forward to, if it's possible, an even better job as Chief of Staff.
The president replaced Reince Priebus, the outgoing Chief of Staff, with Kelly in an attempt to bring more order and discipline to a White House that some outside observers have noted is chaotic from time to time, one that's got competing power centers that need a tough wrangler in the middle of it to try to keep everybody in line. Kelly is an old hand in Washington, D.C., knows the politics here, but Kelly also has his work cut out for him. There's no question. Not only does he have to wrangle the White House staff, but he comes in to the job facing increasing pressures abroad. Russia expelling 755 U.S. diplomats in the last few days. North Korea firing another intercontinental ballistic missile. In the cabinet meeting just a short time ago, I asked the president what he could do about the increasing threat from North Korea. Listen here.
We'll handle North Korea. We're going to be able to handle it. It will be handled. We handle everything. Thank you very much.
One thing the president won't be doing, Molly, is seeking new sanctions at the United Nations Security Council. His United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina, saying yesterday that basically any new UN sanction that doesn't put increasing pressure on the international community to try to get North Korea to rein in its nuclear program is useless. And one thing that the White House is not letting go of just yet is this idea of repeal and replace of Obamacare. They don't expect that they'll get anything done before the August recess, but some administration officials are hopeful, Molly, that in September, after all the members of Congress have had a chance to hear from their constituents during the upcoming August break and getting some pressure from the governors as well on their desire to see block grants for Medicare and Medicaid, that there might be enough pressure brought to bear that repeal and replace could possibly fly in September. Still a tall order, though, Molly.
Yeah, it will be an interesting August for a lot of those lawmakers and a fascinating week in Washington. John Roberts watching it all. Thank you.
Thank you.
With President Trump expressing confidence in his new Chief of Staff, will his administration get the fresh start it needs? Well, that could be up to the president himself.
Inside the White House, the Chief of Staff's power comes from the president. And if the president sends a strong message to the staff that if you want to talk to me, you come through the Chief of Staff, well, that will really empower the new Chief of Staff.
Joining us now is Bret Baier, the anchor of Special Report. You know, there were a lot of people speculating that Reince Priebus might go, but I didn't hear John Kelly's name tossed around as somebody who might take over as Chief of Staff. I mean, something of a Friday surprise. What does he bring to this office, Bret?
Well, John, good morning. I think if you believe the inside talk, the president was thinking about this for some time, had talked to General Kelly about it for some time. What that time is, we don't really know specifically. But what they're hoping is what you heard there, that it will bring some structure, some organization, some grounding of a military type structure that General Kelly is used to bring and be empowered to be the gatekeeper. And that really is the question. Will the president empower General Kelly to be the gatekeeper in the Oval Office? Those are the best chiefs of staff. Those are the ones that control, how the trains move in and out of the White House, and what kind of access is granted to the president. Now, we don't know the answer to that yet. There are a lot of powerful figures. Anthony Scaramucci has his own relationship with the president. Kellyanne Conway, obviously Ivanka Trump, her father, Jared Kushner, father-in-law, and who gets access to the White House, I think, is the crucial question to the Oval Office, rather.
Well, and another crucial question is not only does he have control over everybody on the staff, but does he have control over the Twitter machine? Who's going to be monitoring the president's Twitter use?
Well, I think if General Kelly had his say, probably they would go over policy decisions on coming out in 140 characters or less. I think today you saw a tweet storm that was kind of the intro to John Kelly's time as chief of staff, but really the policy issues that had not been batted around beforehand, arguably, for example, the transgenders in the military that came out via tweet, as of today, that has still not moved forward as far as policy. The Pentagon has not moved forward on implementing it. There's no sense that the defense secretary is moving forward with any specific orders. So as of today, that tweet is kind of still in limbo. So I wonder if the policy part of Twitter is going to be analyzed by the new chief of staff.
As you know, over the weekend, the president tweeted that he wants another attempt at an Obamacare overhaul. And again, that kind of caught Washington by surprise. Is the Senate ready for that? Is the House ready for that?
Well, there are things bouncing around. Senator Lindsey Graham has a proposal. There are other proposals. The Democrats would like to get back to the committee and start from the beginning in a bipartisan way. That is what Senator John McCain said he wanted to do when he voted no, go back to regular order. That is a process that takes a long time and obviously would mean that Obamacare in and of itself would stay intact, and they would try to fix what's there.
Mick Mulvaney, the president's budget director, said over the weekend that the president wants more discipline and more structure in the White House. If so, I mean, a military general, who is used to clear chains of command and decision-making coming down from the very top is obviously the right choice. But the president, witness his campaign style. He's a freewheeling kind of guy. He enjoys that freewheeling interaction, and you have to wonder whether he will allow General Kelly to impose the kind of discipline that most people seem to think is necessary for a chief of staff to be effective.
This is the president's choice, and he has chosen General Kelly for a reason. And Kelly was a senior aide to both defense secretaries Leon Panetta and Bob Gates. He has a lot of experience in Washington, used to be the head of Southern Command, and knows the regimented way to move forward on things. Whether he will be empowered to do that in the Oval Office is really the question. Clearly, the president has trust in Kelly, and you heard that in some of the remarks this morning at that cabinet meeting. And we'll see if he is empowered to put all the gates on the Oval Office that perhaps need to be there.
Well, we're 6 months in, and we've got a new team coming in. It's going to be fascinating to watch. We'll be watching Special Report tonight. Brett Baer, the anchor. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
New information on North Korea in the wake of Friday's test of an intercontinental ballistic missile.
The U.S. testing our THAAD missile defense system, as it's called, over the weekend, and flying B-1 bombers over the Korean peninsula. Vice President Pence also talking tough, promising a global response.
The continued provocations by the rogue regime in North Korea are unacceptable. And the United States of America is going to continue to marshal the support of nations across the region and across the world to further isolate North Korea economically and diplomatically.
Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott is live in London with more on that. Greg.
Hi, John. Molly, that's right. We heard from the vice president there, some strong words, and we've been seeing some muscle flexing at the very least from the United States following that missile test by North Korea on Friday. As you noted, some bombers buzzing a South Korean base. Those are these B-1 bombers, which are nuclear capable. They actually dropped some dummy bombs at a test range not far from the base. Also significant, the successful test of the anti-ballistic missile system, which will be set up in South Korea to defend it against anything from North Korea. The missile launched over the weekend, actually coming from a U.S. base in Alaska. Experts are still examining that missile launched by North Korea on Friday. It is the second, believed to be the second, intercontinental ballistic missile launched by Pyongyang in July alone. Experts told me, and I've told other people, that this one theoretically could hit the lower 48 in the United States, West Coast, maybe deep into the Midwest. This, of course, prompting a lot of high-level discussions in Washington. This morning, President Trump speaking by telephone to Japanese Prime Minister Abe, coming out of that saying that more action is required. In a statement, White House saying that North Korea is a grave and a back. It also was getting some tweet attacks from the president over the weekend. President saying that the U.S. is disappointed in what China has been doing. China saying, hey, it's not just us, other countries need to get involved. But we also, over the weekend, John, heard from U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, saying that she's not even going to call for a UN Security Council meeting without more action coming from China, that there basically would be no point in that. So some tough words and, again, a little bit of muscle flexing. Back to you.
Yeah, getting closer to the boiling point in that part of the world, it looks like. Greg Palcott. Greg, thank you.
A man who pleaded not guilty in the sexual abuse and murder of an 11-year-old girl appears to have changed his mind. A look ahead to this week's hearing. And General John Kelly sworn in as the new White House Chief of Staff, an appointment greeted with mostly rave reviews in the press. General Kelly taking a key role in an administration that has had more than a few dust-ups with the press. So can he change the tone? Our media panel weighs in.
Attention,
Right now, new information on some crime stories we're following. A plea change expected this week by this man, accused of sexually assaulting and murdering an 11-year-old girl. He previously pleaded not guilty. It's unclear if his attorneys have struck a deal with federal prosecutors. Deliberations begin today in the case of pharmaceutical entrepreneur Martin Shkreli, dubbed Pharma Bro. He gained national attention in 2015 for hiking drug prices 5,000%. If convicted of fraud, he could face up to 20 years in prison. And a new search this weekend for 7-year-old Kyron Horman, who vanished in 2010 without a trace. Still no sign of him, despite the largest search and rescue effort ever conducted in the state of Oregon. Police say they still get tips from all over the nation. No arrests have been made in the case. John?
Well, General John Kelly experiencing a bit of a honeymoon with the media as he takes over the new White House Chief of Staff position. A quote from the Washington Post reads, he will bring some plain-spoken discipline to an often chaotic West Wing. And a headline in the New York Times reads, quote, John Kelly, new Chief of Staff, is seen as a beacon of discipline. Let's take it up with our media panel today. Judy Miller is a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter, author, and Fox News contributor. Joe Concha is also with us, media reporter for The Hill. Thanks, both of you, for being here in our brand spanking new studio. Did I say that before?
I think we're a trivia question now, right? Who were your first guests on set?
There you go.
In the new studio.
All right.
We're doing trivia questions.
So if it's a honeymoon, Judy, how long can it last?
Well, we will see. I mean, whenever I look at my old paper, the New York Times, and I see the word square-jawed, you know that they are in love. That is definitely love. Equals question. Will is to report to Kelly? Is Scaramucci going to report to Kelly? Is the president going to listen to Kelly? Or is the president going to be the president? In which case, yes, General Kelly will have his work cut out for him.
Joe, he is the first general to serve in that role since Al Haig, during the Nixon administration.
1973. I went back and watched Mr. Kelly, or General Kelly, during some of his interviews. And what I see is, here are my exact notes: authentic, sober, no nonsense. Doesn't sound like a politician or establishment guy.
Joe, you could write for the New York Times.
Well, they hire anybody these days, right?
But he does. I mean, he was the top aide to 2 secretaries of defense, and in that position, you have to sort of know the political ways of Washington, don't you?
Yeah, you do, but being at the Secretary of Defense level is different from being in the White House. Different set of skills. And by the way, remember, military people are not supposed to be involved in policy, and they're not supposed to be involved in politics, and now General Kelly is going to find himself in the middle of both.
And General Kelly does not like the political end of the job. He's been in the military for nearly 5 decades, and he actually admitted, I don't like that particular part of the job. But you talk about a love affair. All I remember is John McCain used to have a love affair with the media as well. Then he ran for president and everybody turned on him. And we even saw last week, he comes back to the Senate. It's dramatic. He has an aggressive form of brain cancer. And then he votes for the health care debate to happen. Everybody turns on him until he voted against it, and then the media loved him again. That's how it works. It's all about action.
So, Judy, how long will the square-jawed General Kelly enjoy this love affair with the New York Times?
I think a lot depends on President Trump, because President Trump is his own chief of staff, his own communications advisor. President Trump is used to running the show. Is he going to really sit down and listen when General Kelly says, Mr. President, tweeting is not policy and it doesn't help you? Is that going to happen? Because if not, we're looking at basically, this is Game of Thrones, Washington style. It won't be different.
Our media expert Howard Kurtz had some thoughts on the new chief of staff at the White House. Here's what Howie has to say.
There is simply no question that the press has been consistently and almost relentlessly negative toward this president from the day he took office, but that you can't blame it on the press that Republicans couldn't pass a health care bill, or that the Congress, both of houses led, of course, by Republicans, did pass a tougher sanctions bill against Russia that the president didn't want, and on and on and on. I just would caution that these things can sometimes be ephemeral in the constantly changing climate of Washington.
It could be a short honeymoon.
It could be a very short honeymoon, considering that 93% of coverage of the Trump administration on CNN and NBC, according to a Harvard study, is negative. 91% on CBS, 87% in the New York Times. So could one man who's basically behind the scenes change that? No. Trump is always going to be the star of this administration, the face of it, and therefore the coverage will dictate that, regardless of who the chief of staff is.
Judy?
And John Kelly will not tell the Congress to shut up. That is not going to be a winning strategy for the president or for him.
Our media panel today, Judy Miller, Joe Concha. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Molly.
Dangerous inmates breaking out of jail. Now a massive manhunt for one prisoner still at large. We are live with that story. Plus a van plows into a crowd, injuring several people, and the driver appeared to be trying to get away. The charges he now faces.
Just disappeared. Everybody panic mode. He was in there and he just gone. And he ended up on the corner over there on the other side. So. It's crazy.
An L.A. sidewalk after a van driver plows into a group of diners, I should say. Police say he ran a red light, hit another car at an intersection, and that impact sent the van careening onto the sidewalk, striking the crowd. 8 people injured, one of them critically. Witnesses say the driver came out of the van and seemed disoriented before he tried to jump back in. That's when some of those people held him until officers arrived at the scene. Police then arrested the van driver on suspicion of hit and run.
Just in on a massive manhunt for the last of 12 escaped inmates from an Alabama jail. They broke out last night. 11 of them quickly recaptured, leaving one still on the run. Jonathan Seri is following the story live from Atlanta. Jonathan.
Hi, Molly. This happened in Walker County, Alabama. Shortly after the escape, the sheriff activated off-duty personnel and is currently getting assistance from neighboring law enforcement agencies. Right now, authorities are still searching for one remaining escapee. He's identified as 24-year-old Brady Andrew Kilpatrick. He faces multiple drug charges, including possession of marijuana, controlled substances, and paraphernalia. Investigators say he and 11 other prisoners escaped from the Walker County jail Sunday. Authorities offered a $500 reward for information leading to their recapture. The escapees were in jail for crimes ranging from disorderly conduct to attempted murder. Most of them, including the ones accused of those violent crimes, were rounded up overnight in or near Walker County. Deputies captured 2 of them at a truck stop with the help of police in the nearby city of Birmingham. Authorities are asking anyone with information on the whereabouts of Brady Kilpatrick to call the Walker County Sheriff's Office at the number we're showing on your screen. It's 205-302-6464. Obviously, they'd like to reunite him with the other prisoners behind bars. Molly?
I'm sure there's quite an assessment going on there as to how this happened. Thank you so much, Jonathan. We appreciate it.
Certainly.
John?
Well, North Korea's latest long-range missile test prompts a swift response from the United States. The military testing our missile defense system. But our next guest says we still need to do more. Plus, an illegal immigrant accused of attacking 2 women in Portland has been deported from the U.S. 20 previous times. Why city officials let him walk free despite a federal request to keep him behind bars.
It's an awful case of political correctness run amok.
Breaking here on Happening Now, an illegal immigrant accused of attacking 2 women in Portland, Oregon last week apparently has been deported from the United States, get this, 20 times. ICE agents issued a detainer for the alleged attacker last year, but Portland, being a sanctuary city, released him without notice. Steve Cortez, a spokesman for a Hispanic advocacy group, is furious about the situation. Listen.
This is an outrage, and political correctness sometimes isn't just dumb, it can be downright dangerous or even deadly, as we've seen in some cases.
Our Dan Springer is following this story from Seattle. Dan.
Yeah, hi, John. If you're an illegal immigrant, no matter how many times you've been deported, there may be no safer place than Portland, Oregon. The city, plus Multnomah County, and even the state legislature, all run by Democrats, have passed laws declaring themselves a sanctuary for people in the country illegally. 31-year-old Sergio Martinez is now being held without bail on charges of robbery, kidnapping, and sexual abuse. One of his alleged victims is a 65-year-old woman who was brutally attacked at knife point in her home. The other woman was attacked in a parking garage at her apartment. Martinez reportedly told Portland police he was high on meth at the time and uses drugs every day. He has been homeless in Portland for the last year. Immigration and Customs Enforcement says he has been removed from the U.S. 13 times since 2008. He has a lengthy criminal record in 3 states, including battery, felony burglary, and felony illegal re-entry after removal. In December, Martinez was in Multnomah County Jail, and ICE asked the Sheriff's Department to let them know before he was released. They ignored that request, as they do for all immigration detainers. The chairman of the Oregon Republican Party was on Fox and Friends this morning.
He was given preferential treatment. Essentially in Oregon, our governor and the mayor of Portland, Ted Wheeler, have created a protected class for illegal aliens that commit serious
Now, 1 month after Martinez was released, Multnomah County Sheriff Mike Reese launched an investigation into one of his deputies for contacting ICE before having a pretrial meeting with an illegal immigrant. And around the same time, a judge was accused of letting an illegal immigrant slip out the back of her courtroom through an employee exit to escape ICE agents out in the hallway. She was later found to have done nothing wrong. As for Sergio Martinez, get this, taxpayers may actually pay for his defense. The Portland City Council earlier this year awarded $50,000 to launch a project aimed at helping immigrants fight deportation and other legal issues. John?
Unbelievable. That's the word for it. Dan Springer, keep us updated. Thank you.
Okay.
Just in, the U.S. testing its THAAD missile defense system in response to the growing nuclear threat from North Korea, which launched its second ICBM last week. And Kim Jong-un says that it can strike the entire U.S. mainland. Let's bring in Brett Velikovich. He is a former Special Operations Intelligence Analyst, a drone expert, and the author of Drone Warrior. Thank you so much for being here, Brett.
Good to be with you, Molly.
So let's start with this. There are many analysts that have moved up the timetable as to how quickly North Korea may be able to actually shrink a nuclear warhead, get it on a missile, and be able to fire it, they claim, to the distance to hit really the American heartland. Now the THAAD missile defense system has been tested here in America. It was a successful test. The director, Lieutenant General Sam Greaves, said in a statement they're aiming to stay ahead of this evolving threat. So really, how great are our capabilities to intercept a potential missile headed in our direction from that distance?
Well, we've got some pretty strong capabilities, definitely, and right now the THAAD system is about 15 for 15 when it comes to blowing these rockets out of the sky. And really what's important, in my opinion, is to really continue to expand this program. One, the South Koreans need to be utilizing it in conjunction with the Japanese as well. I know that President Trump just had a phone call with the Japanese Prime Minister. Let's hope that that discussion was also to get them to utilize the THAAD system and then link that also with South Korea so that we actually have a strong defense should the North Korean regime decide to fire a rocket at us.
Yeah, the U.S. also deploying the THAAD system in South Korea to guard against North Korea's missiles there, even the shorter range missiles. Is it more effective there at that short range?
Yeah, absolutely can be. But, really the biggest issue here is North Korea's ability to continue to build upon their success, and the fact that really all we've been doing for the most part has just been talking about it, and really there's been no action. And I think I speak for a lot of people when it's really time to do something. We're the strongest country in the world. It's time to start acting like it. And this whole idea that we're going to bring the North Koreans to the negotiation table when literally this is a regime that will starve its own people while it's letting its leader basically sit out there and play with rockets. It's absolutely ridiculous. And so we have to take action. We need to really start utilizing our covert capabilities. We need to do more than simply try and get China to help out, because obviously China has absolutely no interest in helping us out, considering U.S. troops are so close to their area. They have no interest in having a unified Korea. And so we really got to take a number of different actions, specific actions, quickly before it's too late.
And as you mentioned before, it's too late. They've talked about this timetable that's moved up so considerably. But what are the good options here? The military option could seriously result in innumerable lives lost, American lives included. How big is the threat?
Well, it's a huge threat. Look, we don't want a war with North Korea any more than they want one with us. But the problem is, we just have before it gets too late. When I think about this problem, I think about how did North Korea just create a fully functional ICBMs and test them twice within 30 days? I mean, very interesting when you think about how they did that. They're definitely getting help from somebody else on the outside world, or in China or Russia, or potentially even technical expertise from Iran. And so one of the incredibly important is if we're not going to conduct military intervention, which in my opinion is probably just about the only thing that will really stop the North Koreans from continuing their nuclear ambitions and continuing this ballistic missile program. If we're not going to do that, we have got to focus on defense, and the THAAD system being able to defend some of these Chinese banks, some of these front companies, and even the companies that are actually allowing this export of materials going into North Korea. Remember that the North Koreans, they make a lot of their money from doing illicit dealings, drug smuggling, counterfeiting, weapons trafficking, and if we don't hit those organizations that are allowing that to happen, we're really going to have some problems, and sooner rather than later.
Well, the president has said, he's kind of just recently saying that he's called on them. He'll no longer allow this to continue. China could easily solve this problem. I mean, is that the one road to take, or could it be a broader approach as far as diplomacy is concerned?
it's got to be a broader approach for sure, but at this point, really, nothing seems to be working. I mean, every time we get another UN security resolution, again, it's all talk. And so we can't really, unfortunately, we want to rely on our international partners to help out with this, but right now, there's not many people that can really enforce this. And so, it's kind of a waste of time for Ambassador Haley to be working with the UN unless they're actually going to do something about it. And so China's one piece of the puzzle. We also have an incredible, cyber covert capability that should be utilized, capability that far surpasses that of our enemies, but unfortunately we don't use them to the extent that we can, and we really need to unleash our cyber warriors and let them do the job that they were trained to do. So that's another piece of it as well.
A difficult situation. Ambassador Haley has indicated that the time for diplomacy with regard to North Korea is coming to a close. Brett Velikovich, thank you so much for joining us with your insights.
Thank you again.
A fire tears through a historic downtown district. The terrible loss one community is feeling as investigators try to learn what caused it. Plus, the president keeping up the pressure on Congress to get a health care bill on his desk, even warning lawmakers that their benefits could be on the line if they don't act. So with tax reform next on the agenda, will health care make another comeback?
Again, the president's passion about this is that he understands that this system may be working for Washington, it may be working for insurance companies, but it's not working for patients.
Fox News alert, award-winning actor and playwright Sam Shepard has died, apparently from complications from Lou Gehrig's disease. Shepard won a Pulitzer Prize for playwriting and was nominated for an Oscar for his role in The Right Stuff. Sam Shepard was 73 years old.
Historic buildings going up in flames in Oklahoma. The fire started Sunday in a residential building in downtown Wagoner, a small town just east of Tulsa, but the fire quickly spread to several nearby buildings. We're told nobody was hurt, but a pharmacy in business for 115 years is nothing but ashes this morning. The cause of the fire now under investigation.
President Trump keeping up the pressure on Republicans to try again to repeal and replace Obamacare, even taking to Twitter to suggest if Americans have to live with it, maybe members of Congress should too. Tweeting this, if Obamacare is hurting people, and it is, why should insurance companies and why be pays its budget approach on getting health care fixed?
The president simply reflecting the mood of the people. Go and poll the American public and find out what the most important issue is to them right now, and it's health care. So in the White House's view, they can't move on in the Senate. In the people's view, they should move on in the Senate. They should stay and work and figure out a way to solve this problem.
Alex Conan is a former communications director for Senator Marco Rubio, and Wendy Osifo is a professor at Johns Hopkins University and a liberal political commentator. Thank you both for joining me.
Good morning.
Thank you, Molly. Is the president essentially doing here what the American people already see? The hypocrisy that the lawmakers get the sweet deal, but yet they're not getting things accomplished for the American people. Really on both sides, whether it's, neglecting to repeal and replace or setting up a system that falls far, far short. Alex?
Well, he's absolutely right. I mean, I think Congress's approval ratings are even lower than the president's approval ratings these days, in part because Republicans have promised that they would fix America's health care system, and so far they haven't done that. And as a result, we see the markets failing all over the country. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of those reasons is that there's all this uncertainty about the future of Obamacare. So I think to the extent that the White House can work with Republicans and, in fact, work with Democrats and come up with a bipartisan solution to bring stability to the marketplaces, that will help consumers around the country, which is really what everyone's goal is. And that's what the president's, I think, talking about in those tweets.
I mean, what do you think, Wendy? Senator Schumer has said now it's time to sit down. He suggested Republicans sit down and trade ideas with Democrats at this point. I mean, is that the way forward? Washington's been pretty tough as far as reaching across the aisle in these recent years.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. What has become crystal clear in the past few days is that healthcare has become more uncertain than ever. In one breath, we have the president saying that, he will gleefully watch as it implodes, and in the same breath, he's calling members of Congress quitters. And we know that McConnell worked for 2 months to hammer out a proposal, and what he came up with was the skinny repeal, which took away mandates and also cut the medical device tax. So what needs to happen is we need to stop wasting the time of the American people and really come together in a bipartisan manner to create a bill that is good for all Americans.
What do you think, Alex, the idea that allowing Obamacare to implode? It doesn't seem like something anyone would like to see happen, but is it an approach that could work? What's the president's strategy there?
That's a very good question. Look, the Republicans own healthcare right now, whether they like it or not. We run 3 branches of the government. We have the House, the Senate, and the White House, and we've promised that we would do something about Obamacare for the last 7 years. So we own it. And if the president stops the health insurance subsidies, which are passed directly on to consumers, if he stops those, you will see premiums go up for millions of Americans. And you know who they're going to hold accountable for that? The people that are running the government right now. So look, when President Trump was running for office, he said he didn't want to hurt people. He wanted to help them get more affordable health care insurance. I think having a bipartisan solution, which you now see members of Congress working on to try to bring stability to the markets, to bring down premiums, is really in everyone's best interest, especially the interest of the American people.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say Republicans own it because in a sense now, because they were unable to repeal at this point, they have to work in a certain structure. So, I mean, Wendy, does everybody really own this and have a responsibility to the American people?
I think our elected officials have a responsibility to the American people, no matter what side of the aisle you are on. The Republicans right now have the House, have the Senate, and have the presidency, so the ownership is a little bit ticked up in that realm. The American people don't need to feel like they're watching the Hunger Games and may the odds forever be in their favor when it comes to their health care. That's not what we're doing here. We need to make sure that everyone has affordable health care, and the way to do that is to work together in a bipartisan manner and reach across the aisle.
No, it'll be interesting to see if that will be possible. The president also threatening to end bailouts for insurance companies. Now, this has been interpreted as a move to cut subsidies to health insurance plans that are really used by millions of people, a lot of them low income. Alex, your thoughts on that possible approach, on that interpretation?
Yeah, I mean, look, I work with a lot of healthcare clients, and what they all say is that if you stop these payments, which are passed directly on to consumers, you're going to see premiums increasing for millions of low-income Americans. And a lot of those low-income Americans, that's Trump's base. So he's effectively raising premiums on his own base. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. Instead, he should work with the Congress to bring stability to the marketplaces. I think to call it a bailout to the insurance industry, I think is not quite accurate, because it's really those payments are really going to bring stability to the marketplace and bring down premiums for consumers.
I mean, and that is the big question right now. Where can we find that stability, Wendy? That's what everyone's watching right now. If they don't make changes and get something done, then things stay the same and they don't get any better, and it could feasibly get worse if these insurance companies can't make plans.
Absolutely, and one thing Alex mentioned was that level of uncertainty, and I think that that's what's really driving this, is that it's not going to help anyone, whether we're looking at members of Congress or whether we're looking at everyday Americans, as far as the health care is concerned, if there's this level of uncertainty on what is going to happen without health care. We need to define a path. We need to have a clear path, a clear sense of where we're going in this direction to better the American people, and it needs to be something that's clear to everyone, not just the politicians, but your everyday Americans, because again, the people who will be impacted the most are the people who voted for Trump to go into office.
That's right.
So he needs to make his promise to them and keep that promise and let them know what he plans to do.
Yeah, not just to the people who voted for him, but all of us. You know, we're all in this together. Thank you, Alex, Wendy, for joining us today. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
One candidate is among the dead as election protests in Venezuela turn violent. What yesterday's vote means for U.S. relations with that South American nation. And Australia beefing up security at its airports after stopping a terror plot to take down an airliner. What we're learning about the suspects.
We make no apology for making safety our absolute priority, our number one priority. In the order of 137 million passenger movements are made throughout Australia each year in domestic and international flights, and it's critical that we maintain passenger safety and confidence in our system.
Who's not ready for a little Monday Outnumbered? Let's get it rolling. A new day, a new White House Chief of Staff coming up. Style and substance. How retired Marine Corps General John Kelly could bring discipline to the West Wing. And will that help jumpstart President Trump's agenda?
Well, we'll have to see. Plus, some pretty stunning words from House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi on the Democrats' chances in the 2018 midterms as she responds to growing criticism from within her own party. Do the Dems need new leadership?
All that plus our hashtag One Lucky Guy. Outnumbered at top of the hour.
Some new information now on the chaos underway in Venezuela. Deadly violence breaking out at protests over this weekend's so-called election to give President Maduro's government power to rewrite that country's constitution. The U.S. dismissing the sham vote as a move toward dictatorship. Steve Harrigan live for us now in Miami with the latest. Steve?
John, some brutal scenes on the streets of Caracas over this weekend. At least 10 people were killed in scuffles between security forces and protesters. Among the dead, one person running for office. He was shot point-blank range inside his home. Also, 10 police officers wounded. They were hit by what may be the first improvised explosive device used in this conflict. It's really been going on now for the past 4 months. Several people on the street actually appeared to cheer when those police officers were blown up. This was a vote that outraged a lot of people, both inside Venezuela and around the world, because as U.S. officials have called it, it was a sham vote. There was no way you could vote against the government. The government basically selected a list of candidates to rewrite this constitution, and you could only choose from among those government candidates. Despite that, people took the risk of going out onto the street to protest. They faced possible 10-year jail terms if they were caught. Over the past 4 months of street protests, more than 120 people have been killed. The real question is, what's the government's next move? It may be to shut down the National Assembly. Such a move could spike violence even further. John, back to you.
Wow, what is happening there? Thanks very much.
New next hour of Happening Now, the opioid crisis sparking legal action with dozens of states, cities, and counties filing suit, who they are suing and why. A car bombing rocks Afghanistan, the embassy targeted, and who was behind it in a live report coming up.